We are back with another Webtoon Canvas creator interview. Today I have Dytanious.
Hello.
Welcome, welcome. And today
Thank
we
you.
are going to talk about As We Fall. So do you want to read the description for us, actually?
Sure. Okay. And as we follow the main character, Ezekiel. He and his crew are escorting two kids, Star and Rowan, from the Andromeda Galaxy all the way to the Milky Way, at their home planet, Zagria. The story starts at the tail end of their journey on Nova 12, a planet near the two galaxies' border. What troubles await the mercenaries and the two kids? Why were the kids taken away from their homes? Yeah, there we go.
How and when did you get into art?
So my quote unquote art career goes all the way back to third grade, I'd say. um, I initially started off by stapling a bunch of computer paper together and making comics through that way. And I would say it would be like around 30 to 40 sheets of paper, and I would draw like from front to back, just making my own stories. The way I figured out how to draw is kind of funny. um I would write when I was learning how to write cursive in elementary school.
Mm-hmm.
The R, like cursive lowercase r, kind of looked like the top of the head to me. So I would transform that R and make it look like a Dragon Ball Z character. And for me, I guess the more and more I started to repeat that, the more and more it became a habit, and the more and more I started to invest in drawing. But I would say at that time I wasn't very like dedicated towards it until I met this one kid in fourth grade who I cannot remember his name for the life of me, but he could draw really well for his age. And I remember he would always look at my drawings like, man, it looks like shit. I was like, wow, fuck you. Like, fuck you. And, it's kind of like this natural rivalry that was probably one sided on my end.
Mm-hmm.
It sparked an interest in me that went beyond. It went beyond just me wanting to get better than this kid. It just became a habit, and what became a habit became kind of a passion. Because, as I said before, I would try to staple a bunch of computer paper together and just make my own stories from that point onward. And I would say I would have done that from like elementary to middle school. And I've been drawing for the past, I guess, 15 years. And I'm 25, so yeah.
That sounds like a lot of drawing mileage from an early age. Just having like a whole like stack of computer paper and going through it. Like a lot of people that age can't even get through a sketchbook.
Yeah, I was for me it didn't really feel like a chore. It felt very like, okay, have you ever read the manga Tsubasa?
Um, which one? There are a lot of manga called Tsubasa.
It was Tsubasa Chronicles. It was volumes. I had like
Oh,
a
I've seen the anime for that one.
got you. So what I would do was I would take the characters from that when I was younger. This is like elementary school Dytanious or middle school, like around that area, and I would like take those characters, take their designs, and remake them into like my own characters.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, I was plagiarizing, but like in a way, I wasn't tracing though. I wasn't like tracing them. I was just looking. I was observing the drawings and looking at how they would move throughout the page, and I would literally recreate them in my own way.
Mm-hmm.
And this was like, looking back at it, because I come from like an art school, like back in high school, and I went to MICA, which is Maryland Institute College of Art. So like I have a really extensive art background when it comes to my education, but um looking back at it now, me like adult Damon, looking back at that, that was actually really good practice for me because I instinctively learned perspective even though I didn't fully understand it. Because I remember this one scene in Subasa Chronicles in particular that I copied, where it was like a double page spread, and I actually, looking back on it, I did a pretty decent job at making like what was on the foreground um differentiate from what is in like the midground and background.
Mm-hmm.
And even though I didn't quite understand what I was doing, I think I had a natural understanding of space and perspective and composition, which I think are a few of the most important things when you want to start, art, or not start art, to be, you know, effective at it, I'd say. So, yeah, Tsubasa Chronicles really helped me a lot, and other manga as well, like Soul Eater, or I had a bunch of the Dragon Ball Z manga, Yu Yu Hakusho. Yeah, list goes on. I think one of my favorite mangas growing up was Ranma One Half.
Mm.
The art style was really cute. I love that. The anime's art style is even cuter somehow. Like, uh, the concept for the show is a bit dated, but it's still really funny in my opinion. Um, it's just, yeah, I have a lot of, I guess, memories of art.
It's nice to know that I have another anime fan here with me today.
Yeah, I'm a fellow weeb for sure. I'm aware that you're a Jojo fan too.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
I've only watched up to part 4, but I'm still not done part 4 yet. So, who is it? Like, Jotaro is part 3. Josuke is part 4, right?
Yeah, yeah.
'Cause I haven't watched it in a while. Yeah, I really like Josuke actually. I love his hair, but
Yeah,
yeah,
Josuke is quite the personality.
Jotaro is the personality. That guy is a fucking douchebag, but like in the best way possible. Oh, but
All
yeah,
of them
yeah.
have quite the personality.
I heard part 5 is like one of the best. I'm so excited to get to it. But it's been like months since I watched part 4. I had got to like when the big bad guy was finally revealed to the entire team. I forgot his name, but he was disgusting. He's like, I don't want to say any spoilers, but he kept the hand in the bag for a while and shit. I don't want to get I don't want to get into too much stuff.
I'm just imagining everybody's imagination. He just kept the bag in the hand and shit. He has a
Yeah,
little thing for Mona Lisa. Let's just leave it at that.
let's just leave it at that.
Let's just leave it at
JoJo's
that.
weird,
Jojo is weird.
bizarre, if you will.
It is a little bit bizarre. I'd agree. So we talked a little bit about how much anime and manga influenced you growing up. Do you have any like games or like TV shows that influenced you?
Uh, yes. I have huge influences when it comes to TV shows, especially, and video games, I'd say, but more so TV shows. Um, Avatar: The Last Airbender is probably the reason why I create stories. Initially, I wanted to just be an artist before I saw that show, but
Mm.
when I was younger, and I would just watch like um, I don't know, Aang, Katara, and Sokka just travel this world where it was so developed but yet so compact at the same time. Like, it didn't feel overwhelming, and even at a young age I could acknowledge, like, wow, this is like, there's so much happening in one episode whenever you watch Avatar: The Last Airbender, but it does it so cohesively. And I remember being in high school and just watching the shows and just trying to figure out, like, why does it captivate me so much. Another one, a few others, anime still, but whatever, is like Samurai Champloo and Cowboy Bebop. Um, those, I feel like these are very typical like answers, whenever you ask an anime fan, but they're really like popular for a reason, like especially
Yeah.
Samurai Champloo. I remember going back and watching that last year, and just the way even the characters move, like their posture, the gestures they make, like, it's not very typical in anime nowadays. Even though I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing either, because I would imagine like the headache it took to animate something so beautiful back in 2004.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, if we want to talk about like other shows and stuff like that, I would say another recent influence on me, but like kind of big, I would say, is the Sopranos. I've been watching that on HBO.
Mm.
Have you seen it?
I have seen like I won't. I need to make time to see the whole thing. I've seen, like, segments of it because we talked about it a lot in, like, various screenwriting classes that I took in college, but I have not seen the whole thing.
Gotcha. I'm only up to season 4, but I've seen like a good bit of it, and it's like just the way that I think what I really appreciate about that show is like the character acting. And I know, like, they're actors, of course they're going to be acting, but like just like how characters communicate with each other within that show is very like it's really um I don't know, not just real, but it's really captivating, even like with the simplest scenes. I remember watching this one like argument in the show,
Mm.
and the lady there was a guy and a lady arguing back and forth, and she threw a steak at him, but this guy is like huge too, and when he turned around and then like he didn't even do anything, but like you could feel like the presence he was just giving off, and it was fucking like I was expecting him to explode because that's his character. That's what he usually does.
Mm.
But he looked at her and like he saw the fear in her eyes, and I was like, please don't do anything stupid. And he doesn't. He just looks at her dead in her eyes and smirks at her and then leaves. And I think just like it was so off character, but it was like on character as well. It was something that I didn't expect from him, but it was also something that makes sense when you really think about it, you know? And that's what I'm trying to like convey in my writing, making characters do things that are unexpected but that makes sense. um and I think The Sopranos does a really good job at conveying that even in their storytelling outside their characters. um and if we go to like video games, I'm a huge Persona fan. Like,
Oh, I could kinda tell just by looking at your comic. I was like, I'm not sure I wanna
yeah,
say anything just in case I'm just like, "Oh, it looks like Persona," but you thought you were very unique, or I don't know where I was going with that, but I could feel the persona.
yeah, I'm a huge person. I think it's because of the borders I use.
Mm.
I really like the borders in Persona 5, like the text bubbles. I like it's probably too close to it now looking back at it. But when I put them side by side, there's a lot of differences, I'd say, but you can definitely tell my influence when it comes to like I guess the style of the graphic design
Yeah, yeah, your
of my
shape
comic.
language, it has
Hmm.
such, like, persona vibes, just, like, how you compose your panels when you choose to use, like, more flats.
Yeah, yeah. I guess it makes sense because I put like at least 300 hours in like 3, 4, and 5, so that's like 900 hours in the series. So it makes sense that it kind of bleed into my system.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
um, Another huge influence with me, I'd say, is Mega Man, but specifically Battle Network. Um, I don't know if you heard of them, but they were like GBA games back in the definitely the early 2000s, obviously, because that's when GBA was prevalent. But like specifically Mega Man Battle Network 3, 5, and recently because I actually found a ROM for it
Oh.
legally. Um, I legally have a ROM of Mega Man Battle Network 6 Cyber Beast,
Mhm.
and those games are very like it's like an RPG, but an action RPG is it's a weird setup. It's like a stadium, and you fight these quote unquote viruses because Mega Man in this game is on the internet. It's an interesting concept. It's really weird. It's too much to get into in one sitting, but I love those games to death. And if I had like if there was like a video game character that I feel like that will represent me and like how I like view myself, I guess. I always pictured like the imagery that Mega Man was designed in that game, like to be like a part of me in a way, because
Mm.
it's so geometric, but yet so like sleek. Like his design is really good in that game. There's so many good character designs in that entire series, honestly, but especially Battle Network for sure. Um, Sorry, I have a long list, so let me know if I'm going too long. I'm gonna say two more. let's say two more games because I do think they're very important to me. Um, a recent, another recent, I guess, influence by me or for me rather is a Zelda Breath of the Wild for sure.
Yes, I love that game.
Yeah, that game is beautiful. I'm trying to figure out how they are able to do so minimum, like when it comes to the cell shading, but yet a lot. It's like it's really like lush. It looks so lush but simple, but also like complete. It's a very beautiful style. Um, and I explore that game a lot, not even to play it, but just to look at it sometimes. And I think the way they do the lighting in that game is very beautiful, very captivating. I can't wait for Breath of the Wild 2, honestly.
Me too.
Um,
There's like a lot of very deliberate thought behind the colors too, because
I know.
they have like they work really well together, and there's not like as much contrast as some other games, but they find a way to get it to work so that things are still visually clear for the player. Because they
Right,
could have messed up and made it like way too pastel, and then things would be hard to actually play the game.
right. I agree. Like it's definitely like you can tell they put years into that design. The last game series I think is a big influence on me is Metal Gear Solid. I guess one of the biggest critiques or rather descriptions of a Kojima game is that you're not really playing a game, you're watching a movie, which is false because the games are really fun, but they're very story heavy. Like especially Metal Gear Solid 4, I think there's only like there's 10 hours of of cutscenes in that game and only probably less hours of gameplay when it comes to the main story.
Mm-hmm.
Um and love or hate that game for the story because the story is very I would say after the release of 5, which is the Phantom Pain, the story becomes very convoluted. Before was like people who had mixed feelings on it, but I still feel like Kojima does a really good job at conveying like concepts or ideas and tries to flesh them out within the story.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to like do stuff like that within my own stories, try to like just randomly throw concepts at the viewer that is not very concrete, but they can take something out of it, you know, like they can it relates to the story still for sure. And I will probably know exactly what it means, but I'm never going to tell the viewer. Um, and they can figure out what they will with it. Because I actually want to, with Anthony Paul specifically, I want people to be able to like make like theories or like concepts or like discuss like what they think about it. I don't want to give too
Mm.
much, but I also want to give a lot, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it
Um,
totally does. I'm just curious, did you get into I haven't actually played the game, but I was very into the news around this when this was happening because I was listening to a lot of like podcasts and stuff and I was still in college. What did you think about all the Death Stranding stuff?
Death Stranding is the worst game I ever fucking played, but it's also simultaneously one of the most interesting experiences I had with the game. And when I say it's one of the worst games I ever played, I'm talking solely gameplay wise. It's just a walking simulator, and then as you put so many hours into the game, just to be able to, walk better or like, rather transport packages better. It's the game is fucking excruciating, but what kept me going was my intrigue with the story, and the story is very hit and miss in my opinion. The ending was very oh god, the ending. I forgot about this ending actually. Now it's all rushing back to me what happened. The ending is interesting. It's one of those things where Kojima tends to do this thing where he hits the viewers with like a concept and nothing like substantial or concrete, but it he tries to make sense by the breadcrumbs that he left out throughout the game that leads up into that final climax. Because if we
Mm,
were to compare Death Stranding to like something like Metal Gear Solid 2, things become very abstract towards the end of Sons of Liberty, which is 2. And but it's still very you get what's happening after digesting it for a while. I think that's what Kojima does best. He leaves you with something that makes you think about it, and then once you think about it, then you can like come to your own opinions about it. But it might take weeks or a month. It took me years to fully like understand too, because when I first played it, I was like a fucking toddler. But and now playing back, even me like thinking about it, I still find like bits and pieces about like, you know, conspiracy theories that, you know, too like laid heavily on like, you know, with the United States government. Um and I really don't feel like diving into that because it will give me a headache. But it's also I love that game to death. But with Death Stranding, it I sat on it for weeks and thought about that ending, and I was like, this was just a waste of time. Um, because it was so vague, but yet I kind of get it. I guess I don't really want to give spoilers, but it was just it felt like what was the point? Like you know, it didn't feel satisfying. So Death Stranding is a very mixed game with me. Even though I say I really hate the gameplay of it, but I enjoyed the experience of it. I
Mm.
will never play it again though. Like never.
Yeah, yeah. I, I I think you're hitting upon some like great ideas around stories too, like just satisfaction with stories and making things feel like they actually have a point is something that's really important to keep in mind. I think people undervalue the impact that endings have on viewers just because, oh, they're sort of done with it. They're done with the comic, but like the ending that you leave the viewer with is sort of like the legacy and like how well they will spread around your story through like word of mouth and stuff.
Exactly. Because even with something like Metal Gear Solid 2, again, like there's so many great moments in that game, but what sticks with me is the ending. You know, like I remember like enjoying that game from front to back. You know, and it had so many like twists and turns, but like what really stuck with me was the end. And with Death Stranding, it was kind of like we went through all these loops, twists, and shit, and then it felt flat for me personally, at least. And it felt flat in a lot of ways, but like I would say specifically with storytelling, the ending did not hold up at all. It kind of it was just yeah, like you said, the ending could really make it break like any type of media, honestly.
Now we have found out that you by we I mean me and the audience that you have been drawing comics from a pretty young age. So,
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of wondering, did you throughout your life, did you stick with that idea of I want to do comics or did you ever waver because maybe you thought you wanted to do something else or you were afraid to do comics?
You know, that's actually a pretty good question, and I'm going to be honest with you. I never really thought about that. Um, what I see myself doing is creating stories.
Mm.
Um, and I always thought comics was just another way to create stories. So I can see myself at a young age. I could see myself making comics for sure, but I also could see myself animating or you know, writing books. I just think comics is like the first one that I'm pursuing now.
Mm.
But I never thought about like, oh, how am I going to tell my stories? You know, I was like, I just want to make stories. And I love making art, so it's like two of best worlds. You know, just combine them together and just you know do it. So I don't really have like a. I just always knew that I was going to create art and make stories at a young age. I just never really knew how, I guess, and comics just made sense to me. It just me. It was like the next step, honestly. And to be honest with you, yesterday I actually started my first animation.
Mm.
Um, and I found out that I'm not bad at it at all. I think all the gesture drawings I did back in high school are finally paying off. Um, because what I learned was with animation, it feels like the most important thing to convey first and foremost is the movement. Um, the proportions are important as well, but they will come. They should come. They feel secondary with animation to me, at least. And I know it depends on the type of animation you're doing. Like 3D animation, obviously, with rigging, proportions are very important. Because to properly rig like a 3D model, you need to understand like how the joints work and everything. It's very technical.
Mm,
But the style of animation that I'm going for is very gestural. So very Studio Trigger esque, I guess. You know,
yes.
with a very with some bones in there, I guess. I don't really know what I'm trying to do. I just know that the gesture is like the most important thing that I'm trying to convey right now
Mm.
in the movement. So yeah, definitely I think I can see myself getting very addicted to animating. So yeah, did I see myself making comics? For sure, but I don't think it was like my end all be all. I just think it just so happened to be the first step that I'm taking into like, putting my voice out there, I guess.
Now I'm really curious to hear about like your current trajectory of trying to go through storytelling and then sort of like I don't know how to even phrase this, like your path through college. Like what sorts of things have you tried to do to get your story to people?
Um, that's a good question. Honestly, I I'm still doing this, but building my social media presence,
Mm.
making connections with random people that I never would have expected to. Um, I guess one example would be last year around this time. Actually, I ended up doing a commission for I don't know if you know Lakeith Stanfield. He's currently the voice actor for Yasuke in the Black Samurai anime that just came out for Netflix.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've been meaning to watch that. I've been busy though.
Yeah,
That's
same.
cool.
So it's like social media opened so many doors for me because I have like other connections like that as well. But you know, it's just been networking, I guess. Trying to get in terms of trying to get myself out there, really. And obviously building my portfolio because once I had built my website, like late, no, it was earlier this year, and I just sent my portfolio to a bunch of companies. I got pretty decent responses.
Mm.
Two of the biggest ones was Cartoon Network and DreamWorks got back to me. I think within the hour, which is crazy. Um,
Yeah.
they they put me on standby though because they didn't really have any projects that needed people right now. But Cartoon Network in particular seemed very like enthusiastic about getting me, you know, to join their team whenever anything opens up. I think one of the biggest things I'm really trying to get though is trying to get Push As We Fall and trying to like make it like quote unquote official and get like a really steady fan base.
Mm.
Um, which is why right now I'm taking things a bit slow. Because I'm at this weird point where it's like I do have a little bit of fans, but not enough to justify killing myself over. So I want to like I want to build it as best as possible and release episodes at a steady pace, at my own pace. Because
Mm.
I am and I do have a few connections with a particular editor with Webtoons right now, and we've been going back and forth. We've actually became friends, I'd say. Um, but I'm just learning, getting advice from them whenever I can, and they just tell me take my time, do it at your own pace, but keep with it. Um, and I think that's the most important thing right now is for me just to keep making work, but keep networking with people.
So if you're listening to this video and you enjoy it so far, be sure to comment how you guys decided that you wanted to be storytellers. Whether you're a writer or you love telling stories with visuals, we want to know. We do. Please comment. Okay.
Yeah,
Moving on to the next section, let's get
gotcha.
into Webtoon. The Webtoon tea. Not really. So how did you first hear about Webtoon?
I'm glad you asked. I'm pretty sure I told you this before when we were on call together when we did the gesture drawings
Mm,
for the. But I remember the first time I found out about webtoons was specifically through a YouTube ad actually, and the YouTube ad was like one of the sickest like animations I've seen in like well, I've seen better now because so much has came out, but like at that time, it was really, really like I haven't seen an ad like that in a while, and it was for the comic 1000, which is a very short series. I think it's only like 12 or 16 episodes, anywhere in that time frame. But the animation and like the advertisement for that series in particular was stellar. Like I thought the entire website was going to be filled with comics like that,
mm.
and it's not. But that's okay. It's okay because it was something different. I won't say it's like lacking in quality, but it was something very different than I expected it to be. Because 1000 is a very action packed, I would say shonen inspired type of comic with a lot of big names. I'm pretty sure, but I can't remember them for the life of me because I'm horrible with names. But it's actually was really inspiring. And when I dug deeper into webtoons, I was like, oh, I could literally upload here. Like, and that's actually what inspired me to create my first comic, which was back in 2018 or 2017, anywhere. I can't remember which year it was. I'm going to say 2018 though.
Mm.
Um, which was the comic is called Blue. Um, but it was spelled BL4E, and there's a very specific reason why that was, but the four looked like a U. It was a weird design choice, but I rolled with it. And it was actually a fantasy sci-fi. Um,
Mm.
and I lost all the files for it. Like on my old computer corrupted. And I didn't have any like backup flash drives. At least I thought I did, but it was only one episode was preserved, and that episode was just really short. Um,
Yeah, that's like the worst feeling when your computer dies like that or your phone dies and you lose all your photos. It's so painful. I, for the audience, really quick, that's just a friendly reminder to back up your comic because you never know what's gonna happen.
yeah, my comic is on like 4 flash drives now. So yeah, I'm going to make sure I don't lose this one for sure. But yeah, that's pretty much how I found webtoons. Was from this random ad on YouTube, and for better or for worse, it's not what I expected it to be. And I would go and say it's for better, because the vibe that 1000 was giving off was a little too like industry. You know what I mean? It felt
Yeah.
really professional, and that's one of the things I actually quite enjoy about webtoons. It's very the community is very welcoming, I would say. um Even if there is some dickheads within our community that we don't have to highlight.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's something interesting about Webtoon too. There's a lot more variety, I think, compared to a lot of the other Western companies that you could submit to.
Yeah,
So, like, I know sometimes Webtoon seems like it's just all one style, but then when you look at the other options, there's a lot more options you could have on Webtoon to be successful.
there's a lot of webtoons that are very unique. Um you can have like a webtoons like I don't know if you heard of Romance 101, a really cutesy, bubbly, style. I'm pretty sure it's Korean based though. It was a Korean comic that
Mm.
was translated.
Yeah, yeah.
It's really cute. And then you can go from something like that to like, I don't know, what is it? What is that called? Unholy Blood. So there's so much variety on Webtoon for sure. For better or for worse. But yeah, that's my Webtoons backstory.
The next thing I wanted to ask you about is how would you like to see Webtoon, or more specifically Webtoon Canvas, you could talk about either one, improve in the future?
Where do I even start with that? That's such a loaded question because, to be frank, where the website is lacking. And when I say lacking, I don't mean in the quality or like, soul of the creators and like everyone behind Webtoons, all the like employees within Webtoons that's not, associated with Naver at least. Um, I would say have a lot of passion for what they do. And that even goes for a majority of the creators on the platform. It's a wonderful place, but the like I said before in our voice call prior to our meeting today, Webtoons Canvas, the way I view it, is a tool for you to push your story forward. It
Mm,
should be nothing more, nothing less. And the tools that Webtoons provide us on Canvas, in comparison to other websites like Tapas, is, to be frank, severely lacking. But I understand they're very different platforms, even though they're within the same field, I guess. Um, and specifically, I wish there was ways that we could communicate with each other on the platform itself, because
my power went off for a second, but I didn't realize it because I was using a laptop. And
oh,
that's why the Wi-Fi went off. But it was right when you were about to say something dramatic about Webtoon, and I was like, "Oh, the Webtoon ninjas got him."
what Webtoons can improve on is a very loaded question to answer, because I feel like what Webtoons lacks is not the sense of community that it has, but rather what that community can utilize to further push their stories. Um,
Mm,
and what I mean by that is when you look at something like Tapas, right? Tapas has a bunch of tools and utilities for their creators who just upload there without pay. There's so much you can do on Tapas, and I think one of the biggest things, and something that's not perfect. I'm not saying is like a perfect answer to this, but they do have a forum on there, and I feel like what Webtoon lacks currently is letting their community build within the app itself, or website itself, because you can comment on comics and stuff like that, and you can talk to people from time to time, and make jokes and shits and giggles and stuff like that, but it's never like I'm making a real connection with anyone. um and I feel like one way to do that is to like have some type of forum on the site itself for like your community for your respective comic.
mm.
However, I do understand that also brings in its own complications of within itself. Looking at websites like Reddit, for example. Reddit is a great website, but it has horrible fucking people that traverse there from time to time. And Webtoons has shown some like, Reddit tendencies. I'd say like there are definitely some people who are definitely willing to drop the hard R, which is I don't understand why they didn't block that word from the site yet.
Yeah,
But
that's one of those things where it's like, I'm more than a little frustrated with Webtoon on that one. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not even gonna. I know that probably the employees there understand what needs to be done to deal with the situation, but whoever
yep,
is higher up needs to take action to
for sure.
protect people. Like it's not just like it's not just like oh, it's like random emotions and stuff. I mean, it's a little bit of that too, but it's like if you can't if your site is supposed to be a child friendly site and you are not
Quote
blocking words
unquote,
like
right?
that, how am I supposed to expect that you're going to take care of really basic stuff actually? That is one of those things that can be dealt with by a computer. No one has to sit there and go through all of that. You can just
Yeah.
tell your computer to block those kind of words, and they're choosing not to do that. It's not that hard.
I don't think it's rather them choosing. I think they're just limited on what they can do.
Yeah,
Because the more and more I learn about webtoons, the more and more I realize, like, because I said this initially before your power went out, but I think it's not a problem of like the employees that work for webtoons, because the people who actually are doing the the heavy lifting are actually very passionate about what they do, and they're being worked like slaves. I think the problem is like they have to go through this weird process to get shit approved.
Mm.
And I don't know if that's because of their parent company, Naver or Napster, however you pronounce them. I don't know. Um,
Napster.
I don't know. How do you pronounce it?
No, just like Napster's that site, from the 90s that people used
Oh
to.
yeah. Yep.
But like,
Yeah,
yeah,
Napster.
yeah, I totally agree with you. I don't think it's like I'm not blaming the Canvas team, I'm not blaming the featured editors, I'm not even blaming the moderation team. Whoever is like the highest up that is able to communicate with the parent company on these sorts of issues needs to
Yes,
take charge because this is important and it's their responsibility really. Because like Canvas, I'm sure the Canvas team doesn't appreciate that either, and neither does the featured team, or neither does the featured artist. Like,
I agree with you.
the higher up
I don't
needs
think
to take,
anyone
like,
appreciates it.
I don't know.
They really need to do a lot more for their community because I understand what they're trying to make webtoons. Actually, funny enough, if you go on, this is a little side tangent, but it will tie back in, I promise. Remember BSP Black Sand Productions app when it released?
Yeah, can
The
you can you explain that to people really quick? I don't think they're gonna know what we're talking about.
So for the viewers out there, Black Sands Production is actually a webtoons like app where solely black artists or comic creators are able to upload to that website or said app. However, the thing is when you upload or like submit your comic, it's not guaranteed that it will be approved because obviously I think the team will do a background check on you and also they'll see if your comic is the right fit for their site. So you can upload there for free technically, but you got to get approved first. Um, and that this app, Black Science Productions in particular, had came out 3 or 4 days ago. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because the CEO, for better or for worse, his marketing tactics or like how he like promotes his app isn't very professional. I would say is very like he's trying to be relatable for better or for worse. And but what he highlighted in particular was that his app, as of yesterday, was I think number 3 in the most downloaded apps within books on the Apple Store, which is a pretty big accomplishment. He was like right under Wapads, I think. And I think today though is sitting at number 10. So, obviously it's going to go down because the initial hype for an app is like that initial boost and then it's going to fluctuate from time to time. But what I had found out, I was like, how is he over webtoons and tapas already? But I think is based on how the App Store's algorithm works. I don't know necessarily how the number works behind it, so forgive me. But I did find out something very interesting about Webtoons.
Mm.
Webtoons isn't under books application. Webtoons is actually under entertainment.
Yeah, I think that makes a
Um,
lot of sense for them as a brand, actually.
yeah. So that leads me to believe that Webtoons, as it stands, I don't think Webtoons is going to solely just be comic based in the future. I don't know how true that is. That's just me making an assumption because it feels like they're trying to push towards like an animation studio as well. Because you can already originals can already animate their own panels and stuff. I'm sure other sites can do that as well. But it feels like they really based on like certain webtoons got translated over to Crunchyroll as an anime now. Like it just feels like they want to like go in that direction. And I don't think they're going to solely like give up on comics for sure. It's like it's why they exist. But I can see a future where there's like a side for animators and a side for comics, or both. How that will work out, I don't know. But if that does happen, I just hope they get their site together
Mm.
before it happens.
That's a really interesting take on that. Personally, I think that they are under entertainment, and you're just informing of this, so I'm sort of like just randomly talking here. But
Mm-hmm.
I would have guessed that they were under entertainment because they plan to reach the wider audience, not necessarily because they plan to do more than comics on the app, which I think they will, which is part of why they bought Wattpad. But
Yeah,
like, I think in Korea the culture around webtoons is it's sort of like it's one of those things where like everyone just sort of like does it. I mean, I don't mean like everyone, but it's sort of like you go to the movies, you go watch TV, you go watch Netflix, you go read your
Y-
webtoons. Like it's a
yeah.
normal
Webtoons
thing.
is
It's
like
not a niche.
right. Like it's not like here where it's like, oh, you never heard of Webtoons? It's a great app. Like you don't have to really say that. People would just be like, "Hey, you seen that comic or read that comic on Webtoons the other day?" You know, I'm sure that's how conversations go in Korea, if they're not speaking English, by the way.
Yeah.
But yeah, that makes a lot of sense actually. That Webtoons would be like a household name, kind of like a Disney Plus or a Netflix type of thing.
Yeah, I'm
So
really
that's
curious where they're taking the animation stuff too, because like different industries use that for different purposes. Like in the US Western industry, that's like the end goal. That's how you get your money. But in
right,
Japan, the animes are more, with the exception of like the original ones, they're more promotional because the comics do so well. They just help drive
right.
up the sales for the comics, which are bringing more money, and the merch.
It makes sense because comics are more accessible. They have a far less budget than it would take to make a full animation. Um, you know, and just how phones work and where comics are gearing towards the scrolling format, I feel like it's very like it just makes sense that industries are going to like, you know, specifically in Japan would like cater to like um a more of a, you know, comic, I guess, medium rather than an animation medium. Um
Mm,
because that's actually it's interesting that you brought up that they use animation for promotion rather than, you know, the main meal, I guess,
yeah.
for like a better term, because that's what I'm planning to do right now. I'm working on an animation, like a little short ad for my comic. Um, that's probably only going to be like 10 or 15 seconds long at best. But it's going to be like a really quick animation and just going to be like, go read my comic on Webtoons. um, you know, so I can definitely understand the concept of like using animation to promote the comic itself, because you don't need that much to make an ad, or at
Mm.
least not as much as you would need to make a full series, obviously. So yeah,
Yeah, video content is super duper powerful when it comes to engaging with your audience.
yeah,
And they do a
definitely.
lot of that kind of stuff. Like, have you seen Violet Evergarden?
I have. It's very beautiful.
Yeah, have you seen
But
like the original promo ad that the Kyoto, I think it's, was it Kyoto Animation that did that?
I have not. The way I have watched a few episodes of Violet Evergarden through a friend, which is how I found out about it. I never seen the promotional advertisement for it.
Yeah, so what happened was Violet Evergarden was a light novel and it won a contest that is occasionally held by Kyoto Animation. And sometimes they will pick a winner to actually animate. So Kyoto Animation made like a promo trailer for them, which you should definitely go check out. If you thought the
Sure is
original
gorgeous.
Violet Evergarden was beautiful, the promo animation is like, I think it's like a minute long, and they spent like 6 months animating it, and it's crazy detailed, and it is absolutely gorgeous. But like,
I can only imagine.
yeah,
My body is not ready for that right now.
they're very serious about using these to like promo light novels, or like a lot of the Korean comics that I read actually right now are actually promos for their light novels. I read a lot of these like villainous isekai stories. I don't know why, but I'm obsessed with them. But
Isekai is a very interesting genre.
yeah, yeah.
It blew up in the last few years, and now because I remember the very first like isekai, or not the very first, but like one of the earlier isekais for like anime was like Dot Hack.
Oh yeah,
Um,
Dot Hack, ReZero.
yeah, ReZero. Oh, ReZero is the big one that I haven't seen yet.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
still haven't watched it.
I've seen the first season. I haven't had the chance to catch up on the newer ones, but I really enjoyed the first season. Rem is best girl. Um,
Yeah, I hear a lot about her.
yeah, where was I going with this?
Sorry.
while we're on a tangent, I think the interesting thing about isekais is the actual isekai is generally totally unnecessary for the story. There's very few isekais that I read where it's necessary for it to be an isekai. It's sort of at the
That makes
beginning, and then it's not brought up ever again.
that's such a good point.
It's more like a marketing thing, but I enjoy the stories anyways. I'll just take it. They do a lot of one shots with very high quality art of these isekai novels as sort of like a promo to get people to read the novels. And some of them are like absolutely gorgeous, like very elaborately done with like dresses and rendering. It's just one chapter, and they pay a studio to create it so that people will go read the novel, which is a pretty
It's pretty
interesting
cool.
model.
That's actually a really good idea. The only way I can see it backfire is like people enjoying the animation more so than the novel, but it will get people intrigued for sure. Um, I think the novel would have to like really, really like live up to that expectation though, if that's the first thing people sees, and I'm
Yeah.
sure it will. For a lot of them, because you know, I don't think a lot of businesses would like invest in something that they didn't believe would work. I mean,
I
I'm
think
sure a
that
lot of businesses do that and fail, but you know,
mm, I think the
yeah,
thing that kind of helps is usually the anime or the novel in the manga. They're like the manga typically by the time they start the anime is like several years ahead. So even if people like the anime better, they will go buy the manga so that they can know what's going to happen next. And there's never a guarantee that they're going to finish the anime unless it's super duper popular. Like Attack on Titan, for a while I was wondering if season 2 was ever going to come out.
that's how I yeah, that's how the anime got me to read the manga because it was like such a long time period before even season 2 to season 3, I believe. And I was just like, what's behind that fucking door, Aaron? Like in that basement. Let's get the key. Come on. like I just I needed to find out. And I still haven't. I think I have actually. I can't remember because I haven't read Attack on Titan in a while.
So what do you enjoy about Webtoon?
What do I enjoy about Webtoon? Hmm. A lot of things. The stories in particular. Oh my god. My favorite thing on Webtoons right now, like story, is this comic called Windbreaker.
Mm.
And if you guys haven't read that comic, you know, the viewers out there, please give it a shot. It's like the haiku of webtoons. Um, and for people who don't know what haiku is, it's uh, a sports anime about volleyball, but it's you know about so much more than like just volleyball itself. But it's like the sport of it, the camaraderie, the what's the word camaraderie? I don't know how to
Camaraderie.
say camaraderie. Yep, the camaraderie of like the sport. Like it's about the characters. It's just so much in that anime. But I
Mm.
think Windbreaker does a really good job of like having that same spirit. A, a comic that's about bicycling is like the sport of bicycle races or not bicycle. That sounds so lame. Like bike races. And it just has so much in it. It has drama, it has action, it has like romance, it has I don't know, really like heart wrenching moments. Like there was a scenes where I cried, like because I was like, oh, I just never had a comic hit me so hard. Um, so yeah, I think that's my favorite thing on webtoons right now. That comic is, I think, what got me hooked onto webtoons because I shit you not, there's about 3 seasons right now, and there's over 300 episodes. I binged it 4 days straight. Like I don't know what was wrong with me. I was really depressed at this time, and I don't suggest that people do this, but I would like, get out of my bed, eat, exercise a bit, but then, take my shower. And then once I get back into bed, I'm just reading the comic. Like for the next, that was my schedule that those entire 4 days because I didn't have the energy to do anything else.
Oh my gosh.
Um,
I relate. Whenever I take a hiatus and I take a day off, that's what I do.
yeah,
I wake up, I read comics in my bed, I'll take a shower, I'll read comics while I eat, I'll binge, like, a bunch of really long series all within, like, a couple of days, and then back to work drawing comics.
Yep, that's exactly how it be sometimes. But you know, from Windbreaker was kind of like the gateway comic into like my webtoons like passion because I genuinely like love this app for like the content that's on it.
Mm,
Because I also found like Down to Earth, which is a really cute comic, one of my favorites. Also, The Boxer is growing to be like one of my favorites. It's a really rocky start, but like where the story is at now is so like engaging and so crazy and stupid all at once, but also really like clever. That comic is so many things. But I really love that one. So I think my favorite thing on the site is the comics for sure. And if I had a second favorite thing, it's the community. Because like, you guys, like you, Rishala, the rest of Webtoons team. Also I'm a huge fan of Pass Me the Adobo. Like I love uh Bad Prince Charming. It's really funny. um
yeah,
it's
Adobo, I know you're listening to this. You're great.
yeah, I'm a huge fan of all you guys, honestly. And now I'm kind of growing to be like acquaintances, maybe even friends with you guys, which is really great. Um, so yeah, definitely the sense of community in the comics are like my favorite things on Webtoons, hands down.
Next up, I think you kinda talked about this before, but let's talk about it a little bit more specifically, and this could be, specifically, but also broader because it could just be about, like, the internet in general, not necessarily Webtoon. Where would you
Mhm.
like to see the webcomic industry or community go?
Ah, God, that's such a good question. I never thought about that before, actually. Hmm. You know, I actually really love where it's at now, but I wanted to expand on what it already has. I don't want it to like necessarily like change dramatically
Mm,
because I feel like it's going to change dramatically, and I just don't want it to happen. Based on how webtoons have been with their like I know you're just not just saying with webtoons in general, but like with how websites tend to like see what works for them and see what doesn't. They tend to like cut a lot of things off that could be one of the things that drew a lot of people to it.
mm,
And one of the best things about webtoons right now, love it or hate it, is like the freedom there, I would say. Like the freedom to just create and put out there is such an amazing concept to me. Like the fact that there's a huge website that has so many people reading it every day. And I know you're just kind of throwing yourself into this huge fucking ocean and like you're just one small fish in this giant sea of creators. Like I know that can sound like really scary for some people, but if you like just flip it on its head and just look at it from the perspective of like you're really throwing yourself out there to a bunch of people who wants to read comics. Like before like webtoons, tapas, or like these comic websites, there really wasn't anything that's quite like it. um Creators feel like they have so much power within what they can put out there, but not really the power they need to like utilize it to its fullest potential.
mm.
So, as I said earlier, I wish we had more tools to be able to put ourselves out there more. It doesn't make well, it does make sense, but it's a little sad that we have to resort to like other platforms to boost our, comic. Like there should be ways to boost ourselves on the website itself. Like, okay, Instagram has this really shitty ad program where you can like pay for an ad. It actually worked for me for a few times. Like I would pay $15 for an ad, and I think I gained like 150 followers from the amount of people who saw that ad.
Mm.
But it was still like my engagement like boost like immensely because of it. And I'm not saying like it's a perfect solution because you're paying money, and a lot of people like me are broke. So it's not. I know it's not the ideal solution, but it's something. And honestly, in my opinion, to make money, you kind of have to spend it sometimes.
Oh,
So it's
yeah.
like we should at least have the option to like pay for ad promotion within the website itself. I wish there was like a program like that, or not even ads necessarily, or we could like there should be different ways to get onto the front page other than like if one of the 30 or 20 like employers in the company notices your comic out of the hundred and thousands of comic on that website.
Mm.
Like, there should be more ways to get on the front page. There should be more. It should be more streamlined for sure. It doesn't make sense why it's so like inconvenient in a lot of cases for the creator. Because more engagement, is better for the website. The more engagement that you get with your comic is more reasons why people will come back to that website. And I think a lot of amazing stories are being snuffed out by this weird fucking algorithm we have currently. Because I found so many beautiful comics actually that has like 5 subscribers, and I'm just like, what? This looks so good, and the
Yeah.
story is actually really good. And viewers out there, never believe people who just tell you is solely skill. Like hard work will get you there. It's a bit of luck. You need a bit of luck to be able to make certain dreams come true. And that luck can be very large. It doesn't mean like this is a small percentage. Like it depends on like you and how much you put in and put yourself out there. And the more and more you put yourself out there, the more chances you have of people noticing you. However, it is very like hard where it stands to get like your first like 10 subscribers. I was very fortunate within the first few months. Like I think I got like 100 subscribers, even though I've only been out for about since last year December.
Mm.
Um, and I'm almost at 200 subscribers, and that's a really good like statistic to have when I only have like 3 episodes out. But I also can acknowledge like the reason for that is because me, like when I first made my webtoon, when I tell you I like joined like 20 discords and like just it wasn't like I was like like telling people like, hey, go read my fucking comic, you do it. Like I wasn't like threatening people. But I was like genuinely like making connections with people and trying to get to know the community. But it felt like I had to do so much. Like, and my Instagram following is pretty decent enough, I guess. Like I'm at 3K followers, so like a good bit of those people came to my comic. Um, but it's like I feel like there should be better odds because for me personally, like ultimately what Webtoons wants is more engagement on their site. It shouldn't matter who is giving you that engagement. It feels like a popularity contest sometimes. Like I'm always seeing the same
Yep.
freaking comics on
Yep.
like the promotional page, and I understand like it makes it easier for the editors, like if certain comics aren't highlighted, because there are some comics like the one you sent me earlier that just do not need to see the light of day. Um, so I understand that sentiment as well, but I just feel like it's very lopsided in terms of who is seen versus who is not seen for sure.
Yeah. I'm not quite sure about people being able to advertise their comic on the site because I think
That could get messy.
that could get complicated both like legally and like emotionally very very quickly. But
Yeah.
I agree. They need a I've had people fight me on this actually, and I'm just like, I'm not gonna even argue back because you don't get what you're missing out on. But Webtoon needs an actual legitimate algorithm that is personalized. That is part of why YouTube took off in around 2012. They bit the bullet. They switched ranking their videos
Yeah,
from
I remember
most
that switch.
watched to personalized. For a couple months, the algorithm was a little wonky, but then I think like 6-ish months later, they were seeing like double the amount of views on the whole site because people
Yeah.
were seeing what they wanted to see instead of just what was popular. And that helped everyone. It helped, well, maybe not the people at the very top, but it helped almost everyone. It helped YouTube because they like significantly increased the amount of money they were making. It helped the medium-sized creators. It helped a lot of the creators that became big around 2012, like all of the
Mhm.
big gaming YouTubers. People were seeing what they wanted to see, so the consumer was having a better experience with the site. It benefited almost everyone except for like You know those kind of memey videos that used to be popular back in
Oh god,
2012, I mean, before
that
2012, you know?
that and the fucking AMVs like of Naruto and Sasuke fighting, but like under like a Linkin Park like soundtrack.
Oh
Like
my gosh, yeah, made in Windows Movie Maker.
yeah, those were the golden days of YouTube. Oh my god.
Yeah,
Um,
so, like, when Webtoon makes that switch, which I hope they'll do, but I don't know if they're ever gonna be able to do that, it's gonna
mhm.
have a big impact on basically everyone, and almost everyone except for the people at the very, very top are going to see a really significant positive impact.
Yeah, and the thing is, I can see that happening for sure. But the problem with YouTube at the moment, and I agree with you, I think this is a really good policy. But the I think what YouTube is like getting the whiplash of now is I'm not going to say any words that's going to get this video demonetized. However, there are some YouTubers with millions of followers that are coming out as being like kind of no people, like you just don't do that to people. That's all I'm going to say. They're not very good people,
Oh,
and
yeah. I
and I think it gives people like Webtoons, I would imagine, or like other sites, like a little bit of hmm, like of how much they want to give certain people views, if that makes sense. Because
yeah.
that's the only problem with personalized algorithms. I agree with you. I think the good outweighs the bad, in my opinion, because it's kind of like, well, anyone could be a shitty person at the end of the day.
Yeah,
We're not really like following them; we're following their comic. So
yeah, I think bad people are just gonna pop up no matter what they do, because it's a site with a lot of children in particular,
yeah,
and people are going to want to take advantage of that in various ways, some worse than others. And whether Webtoon is like intentionally promoting somebody or it's an algorithm, they don't have the time to do a background check. There could be people that they're promoting right now who we have no idea, but they're sketchy as heck. But it's just kind of hard to check, so nobody checks, you know?
yeah, it's kind of like um innocent until proven guilty type of thing. Like they seem a little weird, but like they really have given us no reason to truly think they're a bad person type of thing until they,
Yeah.
end up doing it. Like as I said before, a certain YouTuber a few days ago, or a few weeks ago actually. Yeah. So yeah, I do retract on my money statement of like paying for ads on Webtoons, but it's kind of like I wish there was something.
Yeah, yeah. I think like too, the current system was fine when it's a smaller site. But
Yeah,
as Webtoon expands and there's more and more people who want to create on Canvas, they're not going to be able to create something sustainable for the Canvas creators unless they are able to sort of like push them out to the appropriate people more. Like, I think like it's fine to have, and actually you should. If you're listening to this, you should have ways that you make money that aren't related to Webtoon at all, because you're gonna have an easier time doing that because of just how that works. Unless you're featured. But even if you're featured, you still probably have other ways that you make money. But like, where was I going with this? What was I talking about? I forgot. But if
okay.
Webtoon wants to create a place where there are people who are focused on their comic full time who aren't originals creators, like sort of like YouTube or like platforms like TikTok, they need to create a way for that middle group of people who aren't like the absolute superstars to at least do kind of consistently well. Not like out of the park, but at least consistently well. And right now I feel like we're seeing this sort of like dynamic where like there's a lot of people at the there's people at the very top who we see all the time on the front page or
Hey,
in
Webley.
the different like sections who are getting a lot of views. So it seems like that's happening to everyone, but then you check and then it's like it's exponential how the
Yeah.
views are, or is it like logarithmic? how the views are distributed.
Yeah, but anyway, there are certain people on the site who do get more attention than others for sure. And for whatever reasons that may be, I just think they're able to better exploit the site as it currently is in ways that are not necessarily malicious, but just, they just have a better shot than most people who are just probably starting out now to get, their voices out there. There's a multitude of reasons why um certain comics are getting more attention now than I guess others, but for what those reasons might be, Webtoons as it stands is so ambiguous with how the site even works. Because I know it's I know it's not a personalized algorithm, but I still don't quite understand the algorithm itself, like how it really works personally. Um like I have an idea, but I just think it's too what's the word? It feels very dated, I guess. How Webtoon site is set up in some ways. And when I say dated, I don't mean in a bad way. It just seems like hmm. It does feel like a website that came out back in like 2015 or so. You know what I mean? I don't know if you get that feeling as well, but
Yeah, I would that is pretty similar to how I would describe it. It's sort of like the way things work on the site is more similar to how the rest of the internet worked around like 2010, 2011ish even. How social media used to work.
right.
I think that they have done a pretty okay job keeping up with like the actual user interface for the reader side. It's just on the creator side and on the discovery side, I wish that they would put in some a little more love. A little more love.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, I agree with that sentiment for sure. It does need just a tiny bit of love that I know that they have, but for whatever reason, certain things aren't happening yet. But hopefully, we'll see changes soon.
So something I kind of wanted to discuss with you today about comics in general is just like visual storytelling and like how to create scenes that convey stuff just with pure art. I mean, that that's sounding kind of weird actually. But you know what I mean. You know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you're getting at, like visual storytelling, I guess,
Yeah, yeah.
or I guess in terms of like conveying stories through your art. Specifically, a lot of things I've learned after making a comic. Um, Sometimes less is more. It's like when I don't know if you do this, but when you visualize like your comic in your head, do you like visualize your characters actually like moving around like an animation? Or is it like do you actually picture it in the comic format?
I think I see it like an anime, like I'm watching it.
Yeah. I would say it's like the same thing for me for sure. Like I can see my characters moving and stuff, but as we all know, like you can't really like directly translate everything from animation to a comic format. So you have to choose specific movements or specific like poses to convey like a bunch of things. You know what I mean? That's why it's best to keep things a bit simple at times. I would say a one vague example I could give is like if a character is just expressing disapproval without saying anything, I guess you could like use their facial expressions or like, like if they were scolding someone, typically people put up like their index finger and wag it back and forth while they're talking. Like just little gestures like that you can think of when you want your character to convey something or to convey like a part of their visual storytelling. Like you just think of like the absolute essential thing that needs to convey what you're trying to say. Um,
Mm.
and sometimes it's not as easy. It's easier said than done for sure. Because sometimes you got to redo thumbnails. Sometimes you got to like um make sure like your panels are flowing well. Like a part of like especially with Webtoon scrolling format, you got to make sure like is when you scroll like you're doing, yeah, you formatted the comic to where it's not like disrupting the reading flow, or rather the visual flow for the reader.
Mm.
Um, so there's a multitude of things that goes into visual storytelling, but I think one of the biggest things for sure is composition. Composition is like, I think at the heart of like communicating what you're trying to like convey to the reader in subtle ways and sometimes in obvious ways. Like, you know, if we use like the rule of thirds, like when you're placing like characters on a panel, or the golden ratio, for example, I typically like to use the rule of thirds more so than the golden ratio, because it's a lot simpler to follow.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, visual storytelling has, I think, I would argue it is just as important as the written story itself, because it's what makes it a comic, you know?
Yeah, 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 for sure. It definitely is one of the defining points in the medium, and it's what makes it like I don't know if like special the right is the right word, but like certainly more distinct and unique from just writing your text in like a novel. So something that's really interesting about your series is I would definitely put you in the more painterly category
For sure.
for sure. Um, so when you're working on that, like how do you stay on task and like efficient and consistent with what you're doing?
Hmm. That's a good question, because at the moment I'm not quite consistent yet.
Mm,
But I do know, at, if the stars align and everything was to work out perfectly for me, I could finish an episode in 5 days.
mm,
Um, because I've measured the amount of time it could take me to draw like 22 panels in terms of like the sketching and the like line work. And sometimes it can range from like 5 hours, other times it can range to 10. Um, it really just depends on the episode itself.
mm.
But idealistically, I can finish like one episode in a week. But at the heart of it, it realistically, because of my schedule, it takes me about 2 weeks to finish one episode because of commissions and other things I have to do within my personal life.
Yeah, yeah, life.
Um, yeah, life hits you. When I organize like my painterly style for the comic, I've always been giving like in terms of like just me as an artist, like all my life, up for like from high school forward. I would say like the label painterly has been put onto me a lot, and it's not a label that I disdain or have any negative feelings towards, but it's just something I kind of expect people to say when they look at my stuff, because it is, you know, it is very painterly, but
Mm,
it's something that I fear in a way, because I kind of don't want to just be known as painterly. Not to just detract from what we're talking about, but um, the reason why I'm bringing it up, because I feel like I'm in a weird place now where I don't want to be too painterly anymore. I want to start incorporating more cell shading like elements into my comic, but not like straying away from the original style from it.
mm-hmm.
So at the moment, I'm in a very like transitional stage and trying to figure out what I really want to do. Because some days I'm like, oh man, this is just me. Like the way I make this stuff, like it it just feels so natural and wonderful when I do the more painterly style. But then I'm looking at it and like, you know, sometimes that takes a bit of time, for sure. I'm a pretty fast drawer, I would say. I can draw things really fast. However, you know, when I render things, I tend to go over it over and over again. And sometimes you don't really notice that you're taking so much time to do that until like it starts to adds up from panel to panel. So I'm trying to simplify my painterly style, to be honest, just a little bit. I don't
Mm.
want to make it like look like shit, but I'm trying to like find that happy medium of where you can still see the texture in someone's hair and skin, but it's not too much, you know.
Mm.
Um, I still want a bit of a rough edge for sure, because that's what I'm naturally drawn to. But I don't want to like, you know, get too wound up in one panel when I got like 50 others to do.
Let's talk a little bit like about backgrounds.
Okay.
So what are your thoughts behind your process of just doing backgrounds? Because you have the more painterly style for that too.
hmm Backgrounds are pretty. I do know like some people feel like backgrounds aren't that important when it comes in comparison to the characters.
Looks in the mirror. Keep going.
I
I'm
didn't mean you in
sorry.
particular,
No, no, no,
but
no,
if you're one of those people, I'm about to say something that might grind your gears a little bit. I
okay, go for it. Go for it.
I personally think backgrounds are an unappreciated side of making comics for sure. As we gear towards 3D, 3D is a wonderful tool. It makes things a lot more accessible for artists. But sometimes, um, it's probably because I am an artist. If I can notice something is 3D, it really takes me out of the story. I'm not going to lie to you. It feels like almost uncanny
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes it works because sometimes it's intentional. Sometimes people want the characters to look very 2D and the backgrounds to look 3D. They want that contrast. But when it doesn't work, it really it's like you remember I don't know if you know about Berserk.
Oh yeah,
Uh
yeah. I know about Berserk. I know about Berserk. All right.
yeah, the you do you know about the 2019 or 2018 reboot?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's what I was thinking about.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So you know when like 2D and 3D can really look uncanny and can take you out of the
Or
story.
you,
And I think
you,
that happens a lot
do you know that
in some
that
people's
thing that
background.
Crunchyroll put out that was like a hot garbage fire?
No,
Look up like
what they do?
you guys look this up too. Look up like X Arm. It is like an
Actually,
absolute disaster
I actually heard about that.
of an anime. I think the Kanapa Effect did a video about why it ended up so weird and so just it's just wrong. Like
The first thing I see is like why everyone hates XR. That's literally the first video when you search it on Google. That's the first video that pops up.
yep,
That's pretty fucking funny. Oh god.
yep, definitely check out some videos on it because it is a piece of work, I will tell you that. But there are some 3D anime that I think are headed towards the right direction, though they're obviously
I
not
agree.
there yet. Like I really enjoyed is it Studio Orange that puts out like Beastars and Hoseki no Kuni?
Oh, Beastars. I don't know what studio it is, but I know of Beastars. Like the 3D animation for that is pretty good, I'd say.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I'm looking forward to what their studio puts out in the future because I don't think they're quite there yet, but I think if they refine the style a bit more within the next 5 to 10 years, they're gonna have stuff that's looking like pretty good in
yeah,
like in general, not just in comparison to other 3D stuff that's going for the anime vibe.
right. And I just think really 3D is just a tool. There's nothing wrong with 3D. I think 3D is very essential. In fact, I got Blender now, and I intend to make 3D assets for sure. Um, however, for me personally, to bring it back to the question about
Oh
backgrounds,
yeah.
I'm sorry, I go on tangents, but about backgrounds, I personally think the backgrounds for a story can be just as important as the characters. And the reason why, in my opinion, is because when if you are it depends on what type of story you are. For one, if you're like a slice of life, like romance drama, the characters come first. Obviously, no one's going to give a shit about the fucking cafe that they're hanging out at. No one's going to give a shit like about the school or like the background, like stuff that's obviously background stuff. Like if you're like that type of the comic, then obviously backgrounds are like you just got to get them done because it's all about the characters for sure.
Mm.
But and for me personally, like for because my story is a sci-fi supernatural story or anything, even fantasy esque, I do think world building is a big part of that type of story. And I'm not saying like everyone has to do like make detailed backgrounds. Everyone has to, do what you will and do whatever is comfortable for you as an artist. But for me as an artist, I think I need to like it doesn't need to be every panel because even in your notes I was looking at, you mentioned like I choose when I want to make things detailed and when I don't want to make things detailed. Sometimes characters will just have a flat color behind them.
Mm,
But what I don't know if you noticed this, but before I do like the flat colors, I do an establishing shot first. Because with um going back with like color theory, like when you look at an establishing shot, at least this is what I try to do. I give the viewers or the readers like this landscape or like this really, not necessarily, well, it's kind of detailed like background image. I hit you with that, and then as you go, scroll down further and further, the background becomes less and less like detailed. That's because at that point I'm already giving you the entire color palette that's going to be in that scene,
mm,
so that gives me more liberty to be a bit more, I guess, geometric with the shape language, or like, oversimplifying like the backgrounds when it's just like a character head talking. Because at that point, you don't really need that much detail. You just need like, if you can see a color that was in that really detailed background, then like you're already going, your mind is already going to be like, oh, they're still in the same environment.
mm,
So in a way, it's like a science. It's kind of like I'm trying to like I make establishing shots first. That's when I think backgrounds are really important. But then once you're like a viewer is like, or the reader, not the reader, once a character is in like a conversation state, or like if they're in an action scene, then the background is secondary. It just really depends on what you're trying to do, but backgrounds can really, really bring your stories to life. And it makes I actually go by this, I forgot what the artist said in particular, like, or specifically, but when he was talking about world building, he mentioned that the characters are who they are because of what they live in and where they're from. So for me personally, I think I'm going to stick with that, like, as in like my characters are the way they are because of the world they live in. So I think I would be doing myself a disservice if I give my backgrounds kind of like um a second thought,
mm.
treat them like they're not a part of the story, because they are. But that's for my story specifically. Everyone has like a different interpretation of what that may be, and not everyone has the time, or not to sound egotistical, but the skill set to do like backgrounds, because I know that
You're
I'm good
right
at
though.
that.
You're right though.
Yeah, and you gotta know your strengths. If you can't do backgrounds, then like you got to figure out how to like you know build that side of you a bit more, even if it's going to be lacking in comparison to your characters, or vice versa. Because there are some people who can do beautiful backgrounds and their character designs are shit. But like, it's like it depends on what type of artist you are. And I think when you talk about backgrounds and stuff, I think really good artists are able to make it, to fake it. Like they're not necessarily drawing everything in the background, but like they're able to like give you the essentials, give you bits and pieces of what they need to tell you about the world, and then they let you put the pieces together in your own head once you continue to read.
Mm, yeah. And I do think the backgrounds in your comic in particular, and in a couple of other comics that I've read, well, a lot of comics that I've read, really do add something to the story. I guess you probably know where I'm coming from, so I'm more explaining this just for the people who are listening.
Mm-hmm.
For me personally, the decision to do 3D, because I could draw 2D backgrounds if I wanted to. Some people might argue with me, but I believe I do have at least decent enough skills that I could do that.
Definitely.
It's just like for the type of comic that I have personally, I don't think that the value that I get from doing that is worth the time that I put into it. Like, I'd
Yeah,
get more value if I would either make longer episodes, or I'd use that time to do YouTube stuff or podcast stuff. Like, I think the value that you get from that is higher because you have a higher importance in setting in your story than mine necessarily. Like, for me, because you were talking about, like, how the world building shapes the characters. For me, it was definitely the other way around. I came up with the world as sort of like a response to the characters. Like it was created in a way so that the characters that I had already sort of established in my head would have an environment that they could bounce off of. It's more of like a playground or like a set than something that shapes the characters. Like I learned more about the world as I learned more about the characters because of that.
I can definitely see that in your story for sure.
Yeah, yeah,
Because when I
yeah.
think of your story, I'm not thinking of the backgrounds. I'm thinking of the characters. I'm thinking of
I mean,
what
I
they
hope you
wear.
are. I hope you aren't
Yeah,
thinking about my backgrounds. Nobody think about those.
I think you do a good job with your backgrounds. Because like, it doesn't need to be crazy detail. I'm going to hop on the 3D train for sure. Because a lot of my favorite artists, like they do their painting, they construct the backgrounds like very simplistically 3D, and then they just paint over it.
Yeah,
And I think
yeah.
3D is really good. 3D is fantastic with getting like the composition down because it kind of defeats like a really challenging part of making backgrounds, and that's figuring out which composition you're going to do. Um,
Yeah, I think something too, like if you're doing 3D, then it's really important for you to understand compositing. And I have a
Ooh,
lot more
explain.
experience in that than I think most webcomics artists have because I used to do a lot more serious video editing than I did now. And I used to do a lot of like motion graphics and I had to learn a lot about compositing and how do you mix elements together and like when do you blur stuff.
Oh, I know what you mean. Yeah, yeah, definitely. I never heard that term before though, but I know what you're saying for sure. So I learned something new today.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So like I guess to just reiterate this to the audience, like either perspective is fine. I just get kind of
Mhm.
annoyed when people tell me personally that my decision isn't good. 'Cause I
No,
like to feel good about my decisions, but that's just a me problem, that's not really a audience problem.
I would like to say just one thing on that. I think the last thing anyone should ever do to an artist is tell them what they should and shouldn't do. Um, it's one thing to give someone valid critique and like try to help them to achieve their goals. You know, if you're critiquing someone, it should be based on what they're trying to convey and what they're trying to do. It shouldn't be based on your ideals or what you think is good. You know, because everyone's different.
Mm,
Viewers out there, please try not to like control someone else's artistic direction or what works for them, because what works for them might not work for you, and vice versa. So just try not to be an asshole, I guess. You know.
yeah, that's a good point. That sort of goes into, like, uh, the difference between a critique and criticism, and
Yeah,
both are, like, allowed, we have freedom of speech here, don't get me wrong. It's just sort of like,
absolutely.
you gotta know which one you're actually doing and what's appropriate. Because there are some people that have criticism and they try to pass it off as a critique, and that is harmful to
Yeah,
a lot of people, especially younger people.
right. And critics out there are very like they will, you know, yeah, just video game critics, for example, they will write an entire article not knowing the team that made the game, but they will make an entire article about it because they played the game, they consumed it. It's out there for other people's consumption, so it's only right that they can give their opinions on it. However, I think, as like you said, like the differences between a critique and criticism is that a critique is a bit more, personable, is a bit more intimate. Like when you're giving someone a critique, you're critiquing what they're trying to convey to you, not really how you necessarily feel or what you think would be better for them. You're just trying to whenever I ask someone, whenever someone asks me to critique their work, I immediately always ask them, "What were you trying to do here?" Because what's the point of telling someone something when they weren't even trying to do that advice or what I think is better? You know what I mean?
Mm,
In the first place. So I think it's very important to know the person's intentions when giving um a critique.
yeah, yeah. I think that's something that's, like, sort of, like that's something that I definitely wanna aim for with, like, my own personal channel. I don't really wanna be a webtoon critic. I'm not, like I don't really feel in that
Mhm.
direction, but I do wanna give them critique because I do believe in their actual goal. Whether or not they'll be the ones to achieve it, we'll see. But I do really
Right.
believe in their actual goal, and it's sort of like I believe that some healthy critique, especially from people whose lives could be wrapped up in this, is important for helping them get there. But yeah.
I agree. That sounds like a really good goal, in my opinion. And I'm more than sure you'll get there with how you're doing so far. You're already doing it, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah, kind of. I'm doing it, but it's not as sustainable as I'd like it to be. I'm hoping that maybe I'll be the one to like I don't know that be the one, but I'll be one of the people who are around to see all the fantastic things happen that I personally think are gonna happen. But
Mhm.
I don't know. And if I'm not, I hope that whoever's listening to this or like you, since you're here, I hope that you get to experience this because I think that the community can really grow and that this is something special and that we
Right.
should keep that in mind in how we're making decisions around things and we should be able to have our voices be heard instead of just being intimidated by everyone because right now is the time where we as creators have the most influence we're ever going to have over the direction of how things are going.
Definitely.
So something I wanted to hear you talk about was sort of like cuz you got into the comic community relatively quick. It took me several months to figure out, oh, if you wanna meet people, it's not gonna happen on Webtoon.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you did ahead of your launch to sort of, like, prepare for all this? Did you do any, like, networking before you even started?
Okay. This is going to be a little lengthy, so uh, for I ask for forgiveness in advance. But basically, the way my I already had the comic like, or the ideas for the comic at least set up about 2 years ago.
Mm,
Initially, I don't know if your college did this, but at my college we had this thing called thesis. Well, not thing called thesis, but we had theses for our respective departments. And by the time you reached the senior year, you had to start your thesis. And what my thesis was going to be was it initially the comic itself, all the characters and everything. I was going to make the art book first, like all the character designs, all the environment designs, and just a little bit of like concept art here and there, and what have you within the book. I wanted to make the book first, and then not release the book, obviously. But so when I started to actually putting the comic out there, I would have because I already was planning to join Webtoons 2 years ago again after my first series kind of sunk under. Um, so my initial plan was like, well, I know on Webtoons Canvas, I won't be able to like make money directly, but once I get my Patreon going, and once I get like a steady fan base, one of the higher tiers could be like, um, I wasn't going to do this immediately. I was obviously going to do this like once the comic was like out for a while. I was
mm,
going to make one of the highest tiers like if you like I guess pay like $20 you can have this little art book like of a lot of the concept art, not everything obviously, but like just a bunch of stuff within the comic that it took to get here. And um that was my initial plan. So and that's how the comic came to be, the art and the concepts and everything. I ended up making like a large folder of like 200 files. I would say like that's worth of like character designs and concept art. And some of the some characters will have like multiple designs because I would redesign them a lot.
mhm.
And um, you know, it would just be like background art and stuff like that. And the graphic design, I was trying to figure out how to do the logo. Funny enough, I was about to release the comic when it was called Refuge Among the Stars. And I only recently, as of last year, I want to say like late summer into like the fall, I changed the name to The Fallen. And then I was like, this sounds corny. So I'm gonna change it to As We Fall because I was just, trying to figure out like names for the comic itself.
Mm.
And the idea for As We Fall, like just the name of it, is like I wanted to the title to convey not on a graphic design element. I wanted to, if a viewer was to look at the title, they will be able to tell, oh, this has to be like something from like a sci-fi or actiony type of story. You know, I wanted that graphic design to convey that, but then also As We Fall ties into the story a little bit. Not to give too much spoilers, but there is I don't know if you read it or not, or if you just checked it out, but in the story, I'm giving a little, even in the first 3 episodes, there are already like a little bit of hints of what's to come.
Mhm.
And there is, since my story is based in like space and like is like galactic and stuff like that, obviously the government within that world is very integrated within uh space travel and da da da. Like it's like the government plays a big part in my story, or like just I guess for like a better term, the military type of powers play a large part in my story, and there is, I guess, a fall that is coming by the end of the first season, and what that is, I can't really say because it's I don't want to give too much detail,
Mm.
obviously. But the title, the style, the character art, the background art, like all that came before the actual comic itself. Because I know some people who make it as they go, you know. And I don't think there's a right or wrong way to make a comic, but just for me, I wanted to be like extra prepared, I guess, because Blue wasn't the cleanest release at all. It was very all over the place. And but I did learn a lot from that comic series, like my first comic that I lost. You know,
I think, like, your first time around too, it's really hard to know how to prepare, like, if I wanted to spend more time preparing my original run than I did, I don't think I know what to do with it because I didn't really know what it took to make a comic, you know? And that's gonna be more individualized than I think people even think. Because there's stuff I do that I know my friends don't do and they're fine without doing. There's stuff my friends do that I'm like, "I couldn't do that if you paid me to do that to prepare." Um, it's sort of like a journey of self-discovery, and I feel like almost more okay now preparing for my reboot than for my original, because now I know what I wish I would have had done beforehand and what is important to focus more on.
that makes a lot of sense, and I think you make a good point of like, just some things just doesn't work for like that works for you won't work for Skylar or Pass Me the Dobo. Like it's like everyone has their own process, and really you never know what your process is until you try it. You got to put yourself out there first to understand you in a way.
Yeah. And it'll take some people more episodes than some. We're all on our own journeys here. So now we're moving on to our advice section. Do you have any advice out there for people who are new to working with colors? Because you have some really, really strong coloring in your comic.
Um, Advice that I could give for coloring, I'm going to try to keep this short because I personally think coloring is like a whole beast in itself. Like there's, the sketching, there's the line art, and then there's the coloring aspect. And color theory is something that a lot of people are not taught, sadly, which is, I don't understand why most schools don't push that more, or
Mm.
most like, line classes don't push it. Because really, you can have the most beautiful artwork in the world, you can have the most beautiful rendering, but if your values are a little muddy, and that goes into rendering, so I take that back. If you can have the most beautiful like drawings in the world, right? But then once you get to the coloring aspect, you have to think not just of the color itself and not just the saturation of it, but you have to think of the value of it. You have to
Mm,
think of like how um, colors interact with each other. You have to think about how like sometimes you can't let the line do the work. You have to let the color like express an edge. You know, like an example would be like the shine in someone's hair. You know, like a lot of if you notice with like a lot of manga even like that part isn't typically outlined like the really shiny part of someone's hair because the value shift of it and sometimes the color is more than enough detail to convey that aspect, but artists who are aware of how to make those colors pop understand like sometimes if you sit like two colors that are the same like of similar tone and value or the same things, but you know what I mean. When you sit those colors next to each other, they're gonna blend into each other. They're gonna bleed into each other. They're not gonna have enough contrast to stick out and complement one another.
mm.
So color theory for the viewers out there is a huge thing that you should look into. There's plenty of videos on YouTube to get started. And I'm more than sure there's a lot of classes online if you have the money to pay for to look into color theory itself because I do that a lot. Like in my if you notice in my when I do make my color choices, like if there's greens like that's dominating the background, right? I'm going to have like an accent color of a red because green and red are complementary colors. So and one of the more recent backgrounds that I recently finished is like this green landscape. Like there's just a bunch of trees. Like the water is like bluish green. Like everything feels like nature. But then the color in the picture, he stands out because he has a red cape. Um, so it's just like the color is really effective when you have a clear intention of what you're trying to convey. Color is so much more than just making the characters look lively. Is also the style. Is also the the contrast. Like you can have amazing values but really shitty colors, and it becomes really distracting. So yeah, like just practice your color theory for sure.
So my next question is, do you have any advice for people who are thinking about starting their career in art and they're like maybe they're just ending high school or like they're partway through college?
My advice to those people, especially the people in college, do not rely on your institution to give you the support that you would necessarily need to um understand the work field.
Mm,
Because when I noticed immediately after leaving Micah, there were just some things that I just flat out didn't learn because even teachers at the school will tell you this. Like a part of the curriculum will be like once you could be learning like a certain program. Like I learned Maya and at my college, and Maya is a 3D program for people who don't know, and that's how I learned how to 3D animate and 3D build. But no one uses Maya in the industry. Like people are typically using like Blender or ZBrush, and some people may use Maya here and there, but it's very rare when you find out like someone is like using Maya or not. Which you should use your colleges and even your high school, depending on where you go. You should use your institution to build connections with people. Build connections with your teachers. Build connections with your classmates. So meaning try to be a nice guy. Because 9 times out of 10, you might be working with that person, 5 years down the line. Um, and really, really try to like while you're in school, try to explore like the internet as a whole. Try to like build your own portfolio just to build it and see where you are, and try to shoot and see if you could get a job like at a studio or something, even if it's just an indie studio.
mm.
Just start like being proactive. I think proactive is the biggest thing because a lot of mistakes that a lot of people make when they rely on institutions is that they don't know how to be independent. And this field, being an artist, especially when you're a contract artist, being independent is like one of the biggest things that I'm learning right now is like so important. That's why I'm really glad that I have like a self-driven like means to make my art. Like I don't really need like an assignment or anything like that to motivate me to make it. I just know what I want to do and I know how I'm going to do it. It's just about doing it, you know? So yeah, be proactive, take the initiative, and really, really, it's like you don't have to wait. Like if you're in college right now, especially like start building your social media, start building your portfolio, and it's okay. It's really okay if you're not where you want to be. What's important is that you acknowledge where you are so you can grow better. Because people make the mistake like my art isn't good enough. I There's no way I can make it as a professional where I am right now. Da da da. But it really, really, the most important thing is to acknowledge, like, yeah, I might not be where I want to be, but this is what I want to do. So if this is your career, then treat it like your career.
Mm.
Don't 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 sell yourself short and don't like cuck yourself out of like opportunities that you could possibly get because what you see is going to be very different than what other people sees. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely helpful advice. Like, I personally too, I really recommend, even if you're like a senior in high school or you're just getting into college, even if you don't actually hit submit, like go try applying to jobs. Because
Yeah,
I got in sort of a situation where I went to a school where they didn't want you to get a job because it was fine art based, and they honestly, a lot of the professors believed that we were better than getting a job. So I didn't really.
that's really toxic. What the fuck?
Yeah, it was kinda messed up. It definitely messed with my head a lot. But on the other hand, it made me a lot more independent now because I'm just like, I no longer have the patience to deal with that. But
Right.
where I was going with that is there's a lot of stuff that I didn't know because nobody told me that you needed to, like, sort of, like, understand how to do to apply to a job, or, like, experiences. Because like, when I graduated college, I didn't have any connections with anyone because the people that I did talk to wanted to go get into fine art, so they were working at museums. They weren't applying to studio jobs, so those connections didn't really work for me.
Right. Yeah,
And
that
I
makes
didn't
a lot of
really
sense.
have any, like, extra, like, curriculars to put on, like, applying to jobs because I was having a tough time in college, so I only really did 1 club. And, I think too, even though I knew that I wasn't really quite ready to work in the industry that I wanted to work in, I didn't really get how much until after I really started applying to jobs and internships, because I knew that I wasn't where I needed to be, even though maybe compared to my peers, because I was trying to focus more on drawing rather than fine art, which can be more abstract. I
Yeah.
was pretty okay, but, like, compared to where I needed to be, I was not there yet, and I was kinda desperate to believe that I was, and I didn't really realize it until I got more into doing my own things, you know?
Right.
So,
And
yeah.
that's how most people learn though. Is like when they're actually doing the thing that they wanted to do. Because like I told you, I put off animation for so long. Like my entire college career, not career, my entire college like lifespan. I never. The only thing I've done remotely close to an animation was like a small GIF I had to do for a class assignment. But when I finally did animation yesterday, when I just finally just did it, there's so many things you're going to learn just by going out there and just doing it. Because like, and I would have never have really known that if I didn't like just do it, you know? So
Yeah.
sometimes you just got to do it.
Yeah, you gotta experiment with things, like, when I first started getting into the comic, I still thought I wanted to go into animation, but I realized that the Western industry was not super working out for me. So I got super into, like, not super duper into, but I, like, actually dipped my toes in the Sakuga community because there's, like, a whole community
Um,
of people who actually wanna go work in Japan, and they have
Interesting.
a
I
different
didn't know
way
that.
of, like, animating. They have different production pipelines. There's
Right.
all kinds of stuff you have to do to actually be able to do that, and then honestly barely make any money, but it's really cool to get into, and I learned a lot from doing it. Like, I think
Right.
that's what taught me how to actually do, like, light source directions in my head instead of just, like, actually needing to physically see it, because the way that you do it in anime and you actually draw out the shadows, because the colorists aren't the ones doing shadows, that's the animators, um, the way that they do it is so clear, and you need to understand 3D shapes so well. So from, like, actually practicing that and going on, like, Sakugaboru, which is a great resource, and, like, flipping through frame by frame, I was finally able to kind of figure it out.
Right.
So just having, like, that variety of experiences. You never know what's
Yeah.
gonna help.
Yeah. Follow your dreams.
Follow your dreams. Do you have any life advice?
Really, I guess I wanted to, keep it focused on comics and my fellow comic creators out there. For people who are really like scared to get their webtoons started for whatever reason, um, it doesn't have to be perfect. It really doesn't. It doesn't have to be the best version of yourself. What it really just has to be is out there. Because at the end of the day, when I know Hollywood isn't the best example, but there's like millions of movies that get made a year. And say whatever you want to say about those movies, or say whatever you want to say about certain animations that are made that kind of that you kind of can kind of look at it and say are shitty. At least you can do that. Like, at least you can look at them and be like, wow, that really sucks. And I know that doesn't sound really appealing. You don't want anyone to tell you that your story sucks, but how can they tell you anything if it's not even out there? I think people are so scared of being wary of putting themselves out there because they're scared that people might not like it. And I think if you feel that way, you should really reevaluate why you were doing art. Because art is gonna if art for you is the viewpoint of other people, then I think you're letting outside sources dictate your life a bit too much.
Mm,
So yeah, take what I say with a grain of salt, because sometimes there are really valid reasons for why you don't want to do it. And really, is take it at your pace. But if you're doing it because it's not perfect, then you're doing it for the wrong reasons.
yeah, that was beautiful.
Thank you.
All right, so we're gonna wrap things up here. If you're watching the premiere, please be sure to leave a comment after you're done watching the premiere with me. It really helps us out. Be sure to go check out As We Fall. You can read it on Webtoon. I believe you have it up on Tapas too, right?
Yeah, I do. My tapas is very dry. I don't know how tapas work, but yeah, if you're a tapas reader, feel free to search As We Fall and you'll find it.
Yeah, so let everyone know where they can find you really quick.
Okay, so for you, everyone out there, just to let you know again, my name is Dytanious, also known as Dytanious underscore art. Um, I'm sure it will be spelled somewhere in the video, so I'm not going to waste time spelling it. But you can find me mainly on Instagram. That's like the biggest platform that I have. You can also find me on Twitter. Obviously, Webtoons As We Fall. It should be in the description. Um, and yeah, like that's pretty much it. Uh, Honestly, just if you guys read it and if you guys really like it, let me know, because I really enjoy, like, I'm really that type of person where I go through every comment and reply to them. So I would like I just love seeing people's insights and like how they feel about my story. So if you ever get the chance to read it, please let me know how you feel.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on today. I had a really good time, and we talked about some deep stuff that I didn't think that we'd get to, but we got to. So, if you guys enjoyed watching this interview, be sure to check out my channel. I have more interviews like this one, as well as other comic related content. Thank you guys so much for coming. Bye.
Bye.